The words hung in the crisp winter air, just between the gazebo and the falling snow. I'm pregnant. For a moment, the world, and more unusually, Lorelai Gilmore, was silent. Then a classic Lorelai smile. A new Gilmore girl. We're going to need more coffee. Stars Hollow, of course, went into overdrive. Luke declared he would build the safest crib known to man, armed with a toolbox and a healthy dose of skepticism for the instructions. Lorelai began what she called extreme grandmothering, which mostly involved knitting and planning the baby's first movie marathon. And then, she was here. A tiny, perfect combination of fast talk and contemplation. She had Rory's eyes and, Lorelai swore, her own caffeine-fueled spirit. The Gilmore girls were now 3. In a small town full of big moments, this felt the biggest. A new chapter, a new story, a new Gilmore girl to take on the world, one witty remark at a time. And as always, it all started right here, in the heart of Stars Hollow. They named her Lorelai, Lola for short. Life in Stars Hollow settled into a new, comforting rhythm of midnight feedings and morning coffee. Rory was writing her book, one-handed, while Lola slept. But a chapter of her life remained unwritten, a conversation waiting to happen. Luke embraced his grandfatherly duties with cautious precision, while Lorelai was determined to give Lola a robust pop culture education from day one. The baby now had the safest, most well-read nursery in all of Connecticut. The christening was, naturally, a town affair. It felt like a perfect, happy bubble. But just as Reverend Skinner began to speak, the bubble was about to burst. A ghost from Rory's past and the father of her future had arrived. The story was far from over. It had just taken a very unexpected turn. The world of Stars Hollow, usually buzzing with noise, fell completely silent. For Logan Huntsberger, it was a long walk from the curb to the gazebo. A walk that crossed worlds, from the life he was supposed to live to the one he just discovered. He said he'd ended it. The engagement, the dynasty, the whole 9 yards. He said he hadn't known what he wanted until he got the one thing he couldn't have. And seeing his daughter in a picture sent by a mutual friend made everything clear. He wasn't there to disrupt her life, but to be a part of it. Rory's book had a clear beginning, middle, and end. Her own life was suddenly a story she didn't know how to write. Every path she imagined was filled with love, but also with complications. Her mother's presence was a silent promise. Whatever she chose, she wouldn't be alone. He didn't offer a fairy tale. He offered a foundation, a place to write, a place to grow, a place for their daughter to have a father. He would stay, or he would go. He would be whatever she needed him to be. And for Rory Gilmore, another monumental choice had to be made, right where the last one began. She took the deed, not as a promise of romance, but as a contract for Lola. The terms were unspoken but understood. He was to be a father. The rest of the story was still hers to write. And so, the next chapter was born. Logan traded his tailored suits for paint-splattered jeans. Luke provided structural support and unsolicited advice in equal measure. And Lorelai watched, ready to deploy sarcasm or a hug at a moment's notice. He was there. For the first smile, the first coo, the first time Lola grabbed onto his finger and wouldn't let go. He wasn't just visiting. He was building a life, one bedtime story at a time. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something more real. A messy, complicated, beautiful new beginning. A family not by design but by choice. And for the Gilmore girls, it was the start of the best chapter yet. For a man who had navigated the boardrooms of the world, Logan found Stars Hollow to be his most challenging assignment. He learned that town meetings were a spectator sport, and that Kirk was an unavoidable, if endearing, force of nature. He was no longer just visiting a strange planet. He was trying to build a home there. Parenting, they learned, wasn't just about the good days. The first fever was a silent, shared panic. All the books and advice faded away, leaving just the two of them, a tiny hot forehead, and the universal fear that every new parent knows. In the quiet aftermath, something shifted. It wasn't a grand gesture, but a plate of pancakes from Luke Danes was the Stars Hollow equivalent of a knighthood. A silent acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he was more than a suit. Their story wasn't a romance anymore, but it was a love story nonetheless. A story of two people building a new life for the person they loved most. The next chapter wasn't just a shop, it was a promise. And it was a promise they intended to keep. The rhythm of their new life was so peaceful, they didn't hear the storm gathering. But you can't outrun your past, and sometimes it shows up in a chauffeured car. Shira Huntsberger didn't come for a reunion. She came for a transaction. She saw a problem to be managed, a granddaughter to be bought. She offered a future of wealth and privilege, a world away from this small town, a world without Rory. But Logan was no longer the boy who did his family's bidding. He had found something worth more than any trust fund. He looked at his mother and made it clear his daughter's life and her mother were not for sale. He was finally home. And just like that, the unwritten chapter began. It wasn't about a dynastic plan or a fairy tale ending. It was about a choice. Two people, one bookshop, and a love story, finally finding the right words. The end and the beginning. The silence left by Shira's departure was filled with something new: normalcy. Mornings were no longer about tense negotiations, but about burnt pancakes and a baby's laughter. It was a life built not on legacy, but on love. Of course, the Huntsberger empire didn't surrender quietly. A single phone call was all it took to sever the financial ties. The trust fund was locked, the accounts frozen. But for the first time, being cut off didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like freedom. As Lola's first birthday approached, preparations took over Stars Hollow, and in a flurry of sawdust and incomprehensible instructions, an unlikely alliance was formed. Luke learned that Logan could be useful, and Logan learned that a nail gun is mightier than a boardroom takeover. It was a party for a 1-year-old, but it was a celebration for everyone. A celebration of a choice, a family, and a future. And as Rory looked at Logan, covered in cake and smiling, she knew this messy, beautiful life was the only legacy that ever mattered. Stars Hollow was no longer just a refuge. It was becoming a project. Where others saw decay, Logan saw potential. He had left a world of building empires, but he was starting to realize he could build something here too. But the past is never truly past in a small town. And just as one new chapter was being drafted, a character from a much earlier one walked back into the story. He offered her the one thing she thought she'd put aside: a voice on a bigger stage. And in that moment, Rory's two lives stood before her: the brilliant, brooding man who had first believed in her mind, and the charming, devoted man who had helped her build a home for her heart. She was no longer a girl caught between two paths. She was a woman standing at a crossroad she had built herself, and she realized, with a clarity that settled deep in her soul, that her future wasn't about choosing one or the other. It was about creating a life big enough for both. And so, the next chapter became a collaboration. The literary rebel, the reformed mogul, and the author who tied them together. Their boardroom was a chaotic mix of creative passion and market strategy, a place where Stars Hollow's soul met the world's ambition. Some connections don't fade. They just transform. The bond between Rory and Jess, born in the margins of books, now lived in the edits of her own. It wasn't a romance rekindled, but a partnership of minds that had finally found its purpose. The old Logan might have seen a rival, but this Logan saw a collaborator. His trust in Rory wasn't a question to be answered. It was the foundation they had built their life upon. He wasn't threatened by the ghost of a past love because he was too busy building a future. In the end, the story wasn't about the choice between two men. It was never that simple. It was the story of a woman who wrote her own life. A life where every character, every chapter, and every choice had led her right here. Not to a finish line, but to the beautiful, complicated, perfect beginning of everything. Success wasn't an ending, it was an engine. The company became the new heart of the town, not just reporting its stories, but creating them. It was small, it was independent, and it was entirely theirs. But empires don't like independent states, and Mitchum Huntsberger had not come to see his granddaughter. He had come for the competition. The offer was a masterpiece of temptation. It wasn't a demand to come home, it was an invitation to the major leagues. All they had to do was trade their independence for influence, their soul for scale. It was the test Logan had been preparing for his whole life. But they had already defined their own success. It wasn't about the size of the building, but the strength of the foundation. They had built something for Stars Hollow, by Stars Hollow, and it wasn't for sale at any price. The empire had retreated, leaving the small town and its new voice perfectly intact. Having rejected the world, they inherited the town, Stars Hollow Media became the official voice of every quirky carnival and town meeting. Their lives found a rhythm, not of corporate ladders, but of community, creativity, and controlled chaos. But in a life filled with deadlines and diapers, the body keeps its own schedule. It started not with a grand announcement, but with a quiet truth passed between a mother and daughter, a secret held in a single knowing look. This time, the news wasn't a crisis to be managed. It was a joy to be shared. It wasn't a complication for the business, but a new development for the family. The reaction wasn't one of panic, but of planning. The old fears had been replaced by a steady, quiet confidence. They had built a company, they had built a home, and now they were building a future, one unexpected, beautiful chapter at a time. The story was no longer about who they were supposed to be, but about who they had chosen to become, together. And so, life was built. Not on a grand, dramatic scale, but day by day, book by book, child by child, the story settled, not into a climax, but into a life. A life that, one day, received a visitor from its past. Paris hadn't come to judge, but to understand. She saw the career Rory had built, not in a skyscraper, but in a community. She saw the partnership that wasn't a compromise, but a fortress. She saw the unconventional family, functioning with a logic and love that defied any easy definition. And that was the final word. The validation not from a parent or a lover, but from the one person who had always mirrored her ambition. The recognition that the life she had chosen, in all its strange, beautiful complexity, was the ultimate success. Because in the end, the Gilmore girl wasn't a girl at all anymore. She was a woman who had learned that a happy ending isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a home you build, with room enough for every chapter, every character, and every unexpected turn of the story. The first day of school is a rite of passage. But for the Gilmore Huntsberger Mariano household, it was a finely tuned, all-hands-on-deck operation. Every detail was a mission, every moment a memory in the making. Her procession to school was a testament to the village she called home, led by a mother who gave her words, a father who gave her confidence, and the editor who taught her how to read between the lines. They were her entire world, walking her to the edge of a new one. At the gates, the three parents paused. 3 different kinds of love, 3 different kinds of hope, all focused on one small girl. The unspoken question hanging in the air, had they prepared her for this? Was their strange, beautiful world enough for the one outside? And then she was gone. No tears, no hesitation. Just a confident stride into her own story. In that moment, they knew. The unconventional foundation they had built wasn't a compromise, it was her superpower. The story was hers now.